Okay, and here we are for another episode, and I'm very excited for this one. I know I'm excited for every episode, but I love talking to these people so much. And on this episode, I am bringing on friend and fellow podcast brother, Doug. Doug, welcome.
Thank you, Craig. It's a pleasure being here, talking some De Palma with you.
Yeah. I know that sometimes our schedules don't gel well. I know you never actually made it onto my Pulp Fiction podcast, so I'm glad that we were able to make the connection here.
I know that one burned me. I was really hoping to kind of carve out some time, but it just didn't. Our stars didn't align good enough.
Life gets in the way sometimes, and that's what it's all about. So it's funny. I know that when I started putting out feelers for this show, of course, I talked to you and Ryan, like we're probably the first two people I talked to about this. I think I actually talked about it on our show together, the show we do on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. But I know you guys are both big fans of The Untouchables. But I guess since Ryan had sort of already covered a scene from The Untouchables with me, you decided to pivot. And we're going to be talking about De Palma's 22nd film, 1996's Mission Impossible. So what kind of led you to do that pivot from Untouchables to Mission Impossible? Was Untouchables like your De Palma gateway, and Mission Impossible was just sort of seemed like a logical movie to talk about?
That's almost exactly the way I kind of approached it. I mean, yes, Untouchables was the first, I'm not as deep a De Palma guy as you are, right?
That's what everybody says.
There are probably very few people that are. But so Untouchables, was probably my intro to De Palma. Great film, and I've seen it quite a bit. But after Ryan kind of claimed his slot on that, I said, I don't want to double up on you. So I kind of went another direction. I said, well, Mission Impossible. I said, that's a film that I've probably seen more than The Untouchables, a film that I know better. There was quite a few scenes that I could have chosen from in that film.
Yeah. And you know what? The one you picked, when I went back and watched it, I said, this is a perfect scene to pick. So we're going to be talking about I guess for lack of a better way to describe it, is the "you haven't seen me very upset" scene.
Yes.
Where it's after Tom Cruise's character, Ethan Hunt's team has sort of been double crossed on a mission. Mm-hmm. And he's meeting with Kittridge, who is, I guess, one of his handlers in the MI, whatever they call their group, IMF. Yes.
Yeah. Do you know what that stands for, by the way?
Impossible
IMF?
Mission Force, right? It's so stupid.
How cheesy is that?
Well, it is. And that's the funniest thing about this whole series, is that the first one came out in 1996, and they're still, I think last summer, the 8th movie came out or whatever, and they're not done yet. And they are just silly films. So a little bit of history here is, this was Tom Cruise's first film that he made when he got his sort of production deal. And it's interesting to look at this film from a Tom Cruise perspective, because he wasn't really Tom Cruise action guy yet.
Right.
And this movie has a lot of firsts for him in terms of establishing him as action guy. I'm going to do my own stunts guy. And in particular, this scene. But Cruise is completely responsible for bringing on De Palma. They originally were developing this movie with Sidney Lumet, I believe. And then Tom Cruise got De Palma's name in his head, and he went back and watched all De Palma's previous films and said, Brian De Palma's my guy. He has to make this film. And Doug, I don't know if you know too much about the history of this film, but they pretty much started filming this movie without a script. So De Palma had a couple of key action sequences that he had sort of come up with or designed, and they kind of built a story around it.
Yeah, they started. That's like, when does that ever happen, where you start with the action scenes? But that goes to show you that he has, because the action scenes, how memorable are they in this film? Like, he has an eye for that, and then he hired a team of writers to kind of write the story around that. And I think the first team of writers, they didn't like the story that they had built around it at first. So they scrapped the whole thing, kept the action scenes, and wrote a whole nother story around that.
Yeah, we could get into the whole history of the writing behind it, but we don't really need to tonight.
before we dive into the scene, I don't know if you were going to mention the failed passing of the torch, so to speak, from the original show cast to the new age Mission Impossible.
In terms of using the Phelps character, or is there something else?
Not
I'm
the
missing?
Phelps, like everybody, all the characters, the actors from the original series. They initially wanted them to come in for the opening scene that went wrong.
Oh, to be part of that team.
Be part of that team, kill them all off.
Yeah, as
like a passing of the torch.
Oh wow,
to the new age. But the old actors, like when they heard about that, they were like, no.
Yeah.
Every single one of them was like, no, go screw yourself. We're not doing that.
That's funny. I hadn't read that, but I do know that this movie, from a canonical perspective, is supposed to take place 6 years after the series.
6 years.
And I do know that Peter Graves, the original Jim Phelps, was kind of a little upset with what they did to his character. Spoiler alert for a almost 30-year-old movie.
Yeah.
But that's the John Voight character. He returned as Jim Phelps. So the great thing about talking about this movie, Doug, is I know on our Stallone show that we do every 5 or 6 weeks or so, or however long it is with Ryan, is we always get caught up in plot, right? Trying to figure out the plot. And the great thing about this movie is you don't need to figure out the plot, because the more you think about the plot, the more frustrated and confused you're going to get. All we know is that there's this knock list, which is supposed to be the identity of undercover agents, and all kinds of people want it.
Right.
And basically, there's a lot of different sequences in this movie that are built around that knock list, moving around like a ping pong ball or something.
Yeah. Well, there's a decoy list, and there's the real list. Then there's his sleight of hand trick where does he have the real list? Is it the decoy list? Like who knows? It does get convoluted in some respects, but we're actually, my main show that I've done is Rocky Minute, and part of the minute by minute verse. A buddy of mine did Mission Impossible Minute Impossible, they called it. Yeah. So they dissected this movie minute by minute.
Oof.
And listening to that, all the convoluted plot points and everything, like it all comes out in the wash at the end where, minute by minute, it's a little different when you're dissecting it that way, but it comes together in the end.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
It took me a few watches though.
Yeah. But that's the other thing I really like about this movie is you don't have to think about it too much. You just know that there's stakes involved and that Ethan's the good guy.
Right. The list is nothing more than a MacGuffin.
No, exactly. Exactly. It's a way to get us from point A to point B, or from action sequence A to action sequence B. But the reason I kind of like that you pick this sequence, Doug, is that if we're looking at it as part of the greater whole of the Mission Impossible franchise, this is really the sequence that the Ethan Hunt and all the other movies is built around, is somebody who takes his responsibility for members of his team extremely personal.
Right.
And when he loses somebody from his team, he takes it as a failure on his part.
Right.
And it's also, I don't believe it's the last time in this series that he's also sort of accused of sort of going rogue. So the sequence, it starts with Ethan meeting Kittridge at this restaurant, and there's glass everywhere. And as he's walking up the street, you see that big, huge tank full of water.
Yeah. Above their heads.
Yes. So I think if, as a moviegoer, they're setting the whole table for you right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that the promotional materials for the film ruined or spoiled the sort of the surprise, but it's hard not to see that sort of introduction and be like, okay, we know what's happening here.
Yeah. The background, the set piece, not background. The set piece is a interesting story too, because this scene takes place in Prague, right?
Yeah.
So that the area is the Old Town Square in Prague. So when it's a head-on shot of Ethan walking through the square towards the restaurant, it's on location. Then when he's walking to the restaurant, you see the restaurant and Ethan from the back. It's at Pinewood Studios
in London.
Yeah. But what they did was they they took that angle of the Old Town Square and recreated it and built the aquarium restaurant right in the middle there.
Beautiful.
So they really went all out to make sure that they were accurate in that.
Yeah, and you know what? That's not surprising to hear based on Brian De Palma and the type of filmmaker he is. I was watching special features on another one of his movies, and the practical location didn't work, so they ended up doing it on a set, and it involved recreating a lot of stuff. I talked with Siko on our Carrie episode about how once De Palma gets an idea in his head to do something, they're going to do it. And then it's just a matter of figuring out how to do it. Whereas other filmmakers will say, okay, it's a cool idea, but it's not going to work. But man, he's stubborn enough to be like, nah, it is going to work. And we're going to figure out how to make it work. And that's what I really, really respect about him as a filmmaker.
But it's to be that, I don't want to say nitpicky, but to be that, headstrong about it, about the finer details. This movie still came in under budget and ahead of time. Like, how crazy is that?
It is. It's remarkable. And I'm surprised that more movies don't utilize, or more action movies don't utilize filmmakers like a Brian De Palma. If you really go back and look at it, if you look at like some of the great action movies that we know and love, like you look at Predator and Die Hard, those are John McTiernan. I don't think at his core he was an action director, but he made great action movies. Another one would be Walter Hill, who made The Warriors and 48 Hours.
McTiernan was on the short list for this film as well.
That doesn't surprise me. I'd imagine in 1996 there was a bunch of different names. But again, kudos to Tom Cruise for seeing the potential here. And I'm trying to remember who I was talking to. It might have been Scott on our Scarface episode, where I talked about like how, it was great to finally see him get utilized for his ability to create action sequences. And that's definitely something that Tom Cruise keyed in on and knew that he would be the guy to execute this vision. One other note about the sequence is the big tank was Cruise's idea. And I don't know if this is just legend making or myth making, but apparently that they attempted the sequence that we're going to talk about in a little bit with a stunt person, and it didn't look right. And De Palma decided and Cruise decided that he would give it a shot. I think with the amount of water involved, they were worried that there would be potential to, just get injured or drown, God forbid. But this could be the start of, sort of giving Tom Cruise the courage and the motivation to do his own sequences. So the other thing I really like about this scene is we get sort of the best of both De Palma worlds here. We've got the talking heads, where, there's two people having a conversation, but then it culminates in a cool bit of action and some highly stylized action, which is a little bit more stylized than I think, De Palma normally gets. But the thing I love about the sequence is it starts with Kittridge sort of, we don't know this as a viewer, but Kittridge sort of getting Hunt prepared for what's going to happen in terms of like him accusing Hunt of being a traitor. But he approaches it very sensitively. He says, you've lost your team. First. Yeah. And the cool thing I love about this sequence, though, is you watch Ethan Hunt start to realize that he's been set up as the fall guy here. And you see his brain working, and he asks why there was another team there. And Kittridge plays dumb and says, what do you mean another team? And we get those sort of quick cuts to all the different people that Hunt noticed.
Yeah.
And then it starts getting, as the intensity level goes, there's a lot going on. The music, first of all, in this sequence is tremendous. But then also, as the intensity starts to ramp up, we start getting those sort of sideways shots.
Yeah, the Dutch angle.
Yep. Cruise tilted one way, Kittridge tilted the other. And it definitely helps ramp up that intensity and the suspense of the scene.
That's funny because that was something that I noticed long before I ever knew what a Dutch angle was or I was like, wow. I mean, it's disorienting. You know what I mean when you see it that way. But it starts. I noticed that it starts right when Ethan starts to ask Kittridge about the other IMF team.
Exactly.
Why was this other IMF team at the embassy? And Kittridge is like, what are you talking about? And then he starts to identify them. And each time, like as the scene progresses, the angle gets more and more steep. It's like as the intensity ramps up, so does like the disorientation. It's like you're inside Ethan's mind as he's going crazy, right up until the moment.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's a great tool in the filmmaker's sort of belt that De Palma had in this sequence. Is he found a way to sort of make us get in the same headspace as Ethan Hunt, as opposed to just being an observer of a scene.
Yes.
It got us involved, and it started to show us sort of the intensity of the scene.
Yeah, it could be like a shot, reverse shot, or like a two shot on that scene. And a scene like intense like that could have easily been portrayed very, very boringly.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the way the music and the angles ramp up, it's like you feel yourself kind of feeling a sense of unease as the scene goes along. It's crazy. That's one of the main reasons why I picked the scene, was like because of like the emotion that it invokes from the watcher.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a decision that a director makes, is like, how do you want the viewer to experience this scene? And that's one of the main things I love about De Palma, is he always finds interesting ways to let viewers watch a scene. And this sequence is no different. And as Kittridge sort of presents evidence as to why he thinks Hunt might have turned, his father recently died, and they give that great line about, it's not cheap to die in this country. He says, your mother's house was going to be foreclosed, and there was an influx of cash. So,
what's funny about that part too? It's almost like the announcement of Apollo Creed as the winner in the original Rocky. It's like secondary to what the camera is focused on, which is Ethan unwrapping that piece of bomb gum.
Yep. Yeah, it's great. It's sort of a James Bond type moment where, the gum was introduced earlier. So as soon as he takes it out of his pocket, we know what's going to happen here. Yeah, and the funny thing about it too, Doug, is every other agent in the restaurant knows what's going to happen too.
Yeah, they all they all saw it. They're like, I've seen that gun before.
Yeah, they know what's going to happen. So yeah, that's Ethan planning his escape. And
before we move on, like another thing I just noticed about that too is like he unwraps a dry piece of gum, right? Yet when he throws it, it sticks to the aquarium. And I always it was just like a fleeting thought, like, how the hell would a dry piece of gum stick like that? But did you see when he runs his hand through the glasses, he gets his hand wet, which moistens the gum enough.
Oh, wow. I did not, but you know what? That's a beautiful detail.
He knocks over all those glasses of water, wine, whatever.
Yeah.
Which I thought maybe like that was just a detail, De Palma threw in there to explain how the gum sticks.
Well, yeah. And that gets back to me saying that it was a little more stylized than I'm used to, but the shot was so stylized and sort of almost slowed down, I think, to express that. If I watched the scene one more time, I would have picked up on that.
I mean, listen, just to prepare for this, I watched the scene about 4 or 5 times.
Okay.
Especially like the slow motion parts, because like when you slow down slow motion, you really get to see the finer details, when you're watching a slow motion scene frame by frame. And no, that was one of the things I picked up on. I was like, oh, maybe that's how like he got that gum slick enough to stick to the aquarium.
That's 100% it, Doug, because again, I can't wait to go back downstairs and put that scene on and watch that shot again, because that shot bugged me.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, it just seems too actiony and too obvious for De Palma.
Mm-hmm.
But now thinking through it and the rationale for it, it was him saying, okay, this is a detail I want viewers like Doug to pick up. That's amazing. Oh, that's so cool. And that's another reason I love podcasting with people, especially about movies, is there's always going to be a perspective presented that you might not have gotten to for a long time or at all.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And I love the big action moment here. Again, the score, fully erupts at that point. The explosion is glorious.
Yeah.
Cruz jumping out of the broken window with the water behind him. It's almost absurd, the amount of water.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I really love about De Palma is he knows that we know that we're watching a movie. So there probably wouldn't have been that much water.
Right.
You know, but we get that much water because it looks cool.
It looks amazing. It, like everything from like everybody, Kittridge and all the other members, when they take shelter against the water, you see the water like flowing over them. Like the shot it's in slow motion is spectacular.
Yeah.
How much detail they got.
Yeah. And Hunt jumps over a body too.
Yeah. It was that guy that's yanked out the window when the explosion goes off.
Yeah.
He was a stuntman. So the way he's like high stepping out of the window, which it's an iconic action shot.
But there's a reason for it.
Yeah, because he's trying not to stomp the stuntman.
And then I love the way the sequence ends where we get the reverse shot and we see the water sort of spread out on the pavement with, I think they were lobsters, right?
Yeah, I think those were lobsters.
And the thing that's cool about it is it doesn't seem like as much water once it hits the pavement.
Yeah, but the way it dissipates, it's like a perfect half moon, and that's again the explosion happens at Pinewood Studios. He runs out, and then as he's sprinting away, they just threw like a couple of 1,000 gallons of water onto the square in Prague and watch him run away. Like it's a seamless transition from studio to location.
That's beautiful. And then at that point, the movie is off and running, and we have a lot more exciting action sequences to talk about within it. But that's the sequence that we were going over. And again, I'm so glad we talked about that scene. Is there any sort of high level thoughts you had that we didn't cover on this sequence?
I don't think so. I think we were able to kind of hit all the points that I had jotted down that I wanted to cover. I mean, it's not a long scene, but wall to wall, there's something to talk about.
Oh yeah.
And that's like I said when you kind of gave me the pick a scene. Obviously, somebody's going to take the vault scene.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to take the train, the helicopter scene. I said I wanted to do something that was like a little more under the radar, but still struck me the first time I saw it. And this was I was kind of between this and like the opening. The heist not the heist.
Yeah, the mission gone bad. Yeah.
Mission gone bad, but that was just way too long in detail. I said we'll be talking about that for hours.
No, I'm glad you chose this sequence, and I'm glad we were finally able to sit down and chat. This was also an interesting movie for De Palma because it's really sadly like kind of the beginning of the end for him as a powerful Hollywood guy. So he was coming off Carlito's Way, which was critically hailed. I don't remember how well it did commercially. And then he did this, which of course was a blockbuster, created a franchise. He declined to come back for a sequel. He wasn't interested in sequels.
I was going to ask you that. Was he ever approached?
Yeah, he was. I think he was approached to do part 2, and I think he's the type of guy that he's like, you know what? I've been there, done that, not interested in doing it again. And then he went on to make Snake Eyes, which we talked about on the first episode.
Right.
And then Snake Eyes, I think I said on that episode, was his like last good film.
Yeah, the last high profile too. Right?
Yeah, I mean, after that, he made Mission to Mars, which I believe he did not have a great experience on. The Black Dahlia. And that was the end. That was his last American film. He made some films overseas, but it's interesting to see how quickly De Palma sort of lost whatever power he had in Hollywood. And this movie might have given him the financial comfort to do that and not play Hollywood's game. I really don't know. I haven't done enough research behind the history.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I'm sure every year he gets a nice Mission Impossible check, or every quarter he gets a nice Mission Impossible check, because again, this
it's playing everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's new movies still coming out. It's on TV all the time. You know, they're constantly repackaging and putting them out in sets when the new movies come out. It's like, oh, right. You have, 1 through 7. Now you have to buy 1 through 8 together.
We had talked about our Rocky collections.
Yeah.
Like how many different box sets they've come out with those.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and not that it was brave of him, but you have your diehard lovers of the original series that are gonna lambaste you if you don't handle this movie with care.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what people did, because I mean, you got purists out there that of course that no matter what this movie turned out to be, they were going to lambaste them.
Yeah.
And he got lambasted for this. I don't know if De Palma's the kind of guy that would give a shit about that.
He doesn't.
But another funny detail I learned researching this is the original director of the original series,
Bruce Geller, was it?
Maybe not the director.
He was the creator, Bruce Geller. Yeah.
I don't not the creator. I think it was the director, some French name or some foreign name.
Yeah.
The studio wanted him to be on set just to like oversee the project. So De Palma like allowed it on day one to kind of like appease the studio. But when he got there, De Palma went up to the guy and was like, listen, this is going to be awkward for all of us. So why don't you just skedaddle? And the guy was like, thank you for your honesty, and fucked off.
Oh, that's great. I don't know too much about it. And I always sort of love talking about Tom Cruise, the filmmaker, as opposed to Tom Cruise, the person, because you don't want to really get too in the weeds with that. But two things I really like about Tom Cruise is I've never seen a movie he's made where he didn't seem to give a shit.
Yeah.
He always gives a shit, and he always seems to give 100% of himself to the movie. And he also advocates for filmmakers. And I think probably a large part of the reason that De Palma had the flexibility he had on this movie was Cruise and Wagner running interference for him. But we got a great movie. It birthed a franchise, and it brought eyes to De Palma as a filmmaker. So, Doug, before we wrap things up, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on in your podcasting world?
Yeah, I mentioned before that I'm the host of Rocky Minute, which is a series where we go through the Rocky movies and analyze 1 minute of film. Each episode, life and a global pandemic really kind of screwed me during my production of Rocky 3, but we got 2 seasons under our belt. They're housed on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. 3 is still there. I got some episodes released, some more recorded, some edited. I have to get around to really get consistent behind the mic again and in the editing booth. So it's the thing about the minute format is for people that aren't really familiar, you're taking 1 minute of a movie per episode. And at your peak, you were doing 5 episodes a week, right? Yeah. For the first 2 movies, we went, we did release Monday through Friday.
Yeah. I mean, for people that don't podcast, podcasting is a lot more than just turning on a mic and talking. There's all the prep you have to do, and then the post work you have to do, which includes editing. So yeah, it's time intensive. I will include a link to the existing seasons that are on the network. And if you haven't listened before, myself, Doug, and Ryan, who was a guest on episode 2, like I said, we get together. Feels like almost every month, 5 or 6 weeks, at the most, and we talk about a different Stallone movie. and we're running out of movies. So I think that's why we've been taking longer between movies. But it's always a good time. I love the chemistry we have together, the three of us, and I love podcasting with you guys. And I'm so
Always
glad
great.
we were able to do this. And Doug, this does not have to be the last time we talk De Palma. If and when you want to talk an untouchable scene, I am there. If you want to talk another sequence from this movie, I'm there. If you discover another De Palma movie and want to talk a sequence from that, we can do that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Casualties of War with Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox.
I saw it years ago when it first came out and never since. So that might be one I would like to revisit.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. There's a lot of De Palma movies that I've seen once or I've never seen. Another one that might be cool for the two of us to do would be Wise Guys with Joe Piscopo and Danny DeVito.
Okay, yeah.
That one's actually on YouTube. There's a channel called the De Palma Archives, which has probably 5 or 6 of his films that are not commercially sort of available to stream. Mm-hmm. And they're hard to find on home video. And Wise Guys is one of them. And I think for two Jersey guys, Wise Guys might be a good movie to talk about.
That's what struck me about that. That would be a good one for us.
I don't know how much you remember about it, but there's a whole end sequence that takes place in Atlantic City at resorts.
Oh, it's at resorts?
Yes.
I remember it being Atlantic City. I remember
resorts.
I haven't seen that. I'd probably never even been to Atlantic City when I saw that movie.
Yeah, no, same here. It's so funny that and I know we're at the end of the episode, but it's so funny because every time we used to go down to Atlantic City, we would stay at a place right across the street from resorts. And to get to the Showboat, we would cut through the side door of resorts. So we didn't have to walk outside, and then we'd come out on the boardwalk. So when they pull up in their limo in Wise Guys, I'm like, I know exactly where that door is. So I don't know.
You're like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme from
exactly the point. Yeah. So we'll definitely find another time to talk, Doug. Again, I always love chatting with you. And
likewise.
This was great. I love talking the sequence. That's one of my favorite aspects of the show is letting my guests determine what we're going to talk about because it keeps things fresh for me as well.
Yeah, definitely, man.
All right.
This was definitely fun, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, you got it. And we'll talk again soon.
All right, buddy.
Spielberg lived down the street from me, and I would often go and have dinner, just he and I,
as one does.
Yeah, as one does. But I knew him since basically, I was a kid also, and I lived down the street, and we would go and, talk about movies, which we did. He would direct a film, or and I would often get him to screen one of his movies, and then we'd talk about it. I'd get him to walk me through every shot. And I remember one night I went over, and there was Brian De Palma. And so we had dinner. 3 of us had dinner in this place up the street. And we were just talking about movies, and there was Brian, and I'd seen all of his films, and I went home that night. Mission was on my mind. I was actually preparing also. I was prepping Interview with the Vampire at that time, and working on a few other things. And I went home that night, and I stayed up for about 14 hours, and I just got all of his De Palma's movies. I restudied all of his films.
For De Palma movies, we're talking about Carrie, Blowout,
yes,
Dress to Kill,
Untouchables.
Okay,
and I just went, oh my gosh, that he's got to direct Mission Impossible.